episode of Inbound CEO. Today we have a very special guest in the building. His name is Matt Heinz. He's the president of Heinz Marketing, where they help clients focus their business on market and customer opportunities, and then execute a plan to scale revenue and customer growth. He's also a keynote speaker, author, and host of Sales Pipeline Radio. And he has over 15 years of marketing, business development, sales experience in different industries, different company sizes, different organizations. And I'm really happy that he's here. Thank you, Matt, for being here.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your next book is Predictable Pipeline.
Yep.
And when I was doing research, I saw that on the Amazon page, you talk about how what worked in the early stages in terms of growth hacking mindset, it just leads to inconsistency, burnout, bad morale, and missed objectives. So I wanted to hear more about what the book's going to be about and how you're changing from that old mindset to a new transition.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. I think, I've been at very early stage companies and I've been at sort of growth stage companies, and there's a little bit of a different approach you take. Like when you're early stage and you're still really working through product market fit, you have to maintain an even higher level of agility around what you're testing. And I think that oftentimes that leads to an appropriate level of kind of random acts of sales and marketing as you're figuring out what works. You're also, when you're in the VC stage, when you are sort of getting your initial funding and figuring out whether you have a real scalable product there, oftentimes you are managing demand and managing your sales based on logos and based on spending sometimes an unscalable amount of money to acquire those new customers. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like as a strategy to get to scale, to get to the next round of funding, that's fine. I think what we find is that too many companies stay with that focus. They continue to just kind of be hair on fire and test a bunch of tactics without an underlying strategy, throw a bunch of stuff against the wall without creating a foundation of strategy and understanding across sales and marketing of what's important, who they should be selling to, how they should be talking to those customers, especially across a complex sale. So when you go from that sort of venture stage into growth stage, it's no longer just about getting logos. It's now about doing profitable growth as well. So creating a predictable pipeline, creating predictable, sustainable, and then scalable programs that can generate the right pipeline at the right time, while maintaining a certain level of not just revenue responsibility, but margin accountability, right? Like, I mean, for marketers to start understanding concepts like profit margin, profitability per customer, even EBITDA, right? For some organizations to understand what is the pre-tax goal of acquisition for these new customers based on lifetime value. So there's a whole other level of math to start to look at. And it doesn't keep you from being agile. You can continue to be creative in what you're doing going to market, but the agility is tied to tactics based on a more fundamentally sound and consistent strategy.
Did you ever think that marketers, because very often we see, I work mostly in B2B content, and we see that a lot of marketers don't have a revenue KPI that they're responsible for. And sometimes it's the so-called arts and crafts department, right? So what are some of the things that, and you mentioned a couple of them, but maybe we can expand on what are the marketers that really want to drive business results should be thinking and should be understanding in terms of KPIs and metrics to track?
Yeah, very good question. I think some marketers really do need to focus on the tactics of their marketing, right? I mean, if you've done the math to say, here's how many sales I need to generate, here's how many opportunities I need to hit that sales number, here's the demand I need to create at a certain time in advance to hit that number, how am I going to get that demand? Now, someone has to go do the work. Someone has to go send the emails, place the ads, what have you. And so if that's your job, of course you want better open rates. Of course you want better conversion rates. And that is your focus because you've done the math and done the planning in advance of that. But ultimately, you have to make sure that you're not just getting a lot of people to fill out forms. You're getting the right prospects at the right companies to engage with you. And I don't even need someone to fill out a form to do that. If I notice someone out in the wild at a company exploring a topic that I think my company can solve, I don't have to wait for them to find me on Google. I don't have to wait for them to fill out my form. there's an appropriate way for me with my marketing and or my sales to reach out and engage that person in a conversation. So the measurement part of the revenue impact of marketing is important, but not required. There's a mental discipline to doing revenue responsible marketing that if you do the upfront work around why you're doing this, and you're focused on the right companies and the right accounts and the right individuals as members of the buying committee, you will make better decisions about your marketing. You will prioritize more of the right activities that are sometimes less about quantity, less about the marketing of more, and are more about the output and impact that marketing is having, whether or not you can measure that.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree with you. We see a lot of marketers on the number of like MQLs when that's not necessarily a revenue number at the same time. Like more MQLs doesn't mean more clients close. It means your SDR now has 1,000 leads that only one will close, and now that he doesn't trust you anymore, right? But you mentioned sales and marketing in a collaborative way, but that's not what we often see, especially in B2B, right? We see that there's like a fight between marketing and sales. So how do you think companies should balance those departments so that they work together versus fight against each other?
Well, they ultimately have the same goal, right? Like if we don't close new deals, then we don't get to keep our jobs. If we don't, if we don't focus on prospects that are ready to buy, then we're wasting someone's time. So I think fundamentally to sit down with your sales organization and make sure you agree on the goals, agree on the metrics that lead to those goals. So for instance, I've got a sales number, and based on my average selling price, that means to hit that number this year, I need to sell X number of units, right? Okay, well, to sell X number of units, how many opportunities do I need in my pipeline based on a certain conversion rate to get to that closed deal number? And to get to those opportunities, what's my conversion rate assumption from qualified lead into opportunities? So you start with some really basic math and make sure people understand and agree on how that math works. And we have some templates this is not complicated math. I'm not a strong math person. This is basic arithmetic, really, just to figure this stuff out. And then later on top of that, so you start with the metrics that matter, like what measures we're trying to focus on, like revenue metrics. And then you say, okay, now who are we selling to? And now you need to agree on like, what are the accounts we want to sell to and why? Who are the people within those accounts that we want to talk to and why? And those become your definitions for who is a qualified lead, not just based on right person, right company, but also some level of interest, reciprocation, or qualification. There are 1,000 ways to define that. But if you and your sales organization, if marketing and sales can agree on the goals, can agree on the pipeline math, and agree on prospect target definitions, and that is not something you're probably going to do in a 30-minute meeting. And so it might take a little time to get on the same page around that. And then if you've got that documented, I'm literally write it down, because I've heard a lot of companies say, well, we understand and we agree on who we're targeting. If it's not written down, I guarantee you it's being interpreted inconsistently. So those revenue targets, the math behind it, and your ideal customer profile, write those down, make sure sales and marketing agrees to those. That is the foundation for everything else. It's the foundation for who's following up with what leads and why and with what. It's the foundation for how much demand we need to go generate. It's the foundation for understanding like more leads are not necessarily better. I will take fewer leads, but get them from the right prospects. So I think a lot of goodness can come from that. For a lot of companies, that step alone is difficult. I mean, the biggest impediment for most companies to reaching that level of sales and marketing alignment is culture. It's precedent. It's the historical relationship that sales and marketing have had. And sometimes you have to do work just to repair relationships before you can get down to the tactics and foundational elements that can make all this work.
I love that. One way that I think marketers can help the sales department as well is through great content for sales enablement at different stages of the relationship and buyer journey. So I want to ask you, what were the things that you've seen companies do well, where marketers create great sales enablement content that then the salespeople can use at different stages in the sales?
Yeah, I think historically, sales enablement and product marketing have done a really nice job of providing late stage content. Like here's how to describe the product. Here's how to describe how the product can help you. The most important thing most sales organizations need from sales enablement that they don't get today are insights. Insights about the market and insights about the customer. Like we need to teach our salespeople how to be experts, not in the product, not in the features, but on the problems your customers have. If your sales reps, especially your SDRs, who are at the forefront of building those relationships, we need to teach them how to ask better questions. We need to teach them how to bring new insights and reframes of problems to the table to help prospects, not ask prospects what keeps them up at night, tell them what should be keeping them up at night. Right. And those insights don't have to be 20-page white papers. They could be bullets in an email. They could be statistics that you didn't come up with that you found somewhere else. But those insights and those ideas that challenge the customer's thinking, that get them to sort of loosen their status quo, are extremely important. Like, your sales team is getting sales training and sales methodology all day long. We don't have to teach them how to sell. We need to teach them how to become trusted advisors and deliver the right insights to build trust and credibility with those prospects.
So this actually leads me perfectly to the next question that I want to ask you. I'm mostly on the marketing side, but you are someone that has touched both marketing and sales. In my opinion, the salesperson of the future is less of a Wolf of Wall Street type of thing, where he's a great salesperson, versus someone that understands content, personal branding, and relationship building. So I want to hear your thoughts on what makes a great salesperson as well moving forward.
Well, I think the idea that a good salesperson, especially in a complex sale, like, if you're just trying to get someone to pick up a stock, I mean, like, the Wolf of Wall Street example, it's interesting, but it's a transactional sale. I'm going to get on the phone and I'm going to do a one-call close, right? That is not, for most of the companies we're working with, most of the people probably listening to this, you're working with a longer-term sale where there's multiple steps of the process. So that mentality just, like, at the door, it doesn't work, right? I do think, the idea of being a trusted advisor for your customer is extremely important. And that's why I bring up, sort of being an expert on your customer's problems and having insights that can solve around that. So if you're able to deliver to your customer ideas that they didn't have before, ideas that make them smarter, insights that help them do their job better, even before they're ready to buy, it makes it so you're not interruptive, you're irresistible. You're someone they want to spend more time talking to and learning from. So I think your ability, relationships are important, right? I mean, my dad sold Caterpillar tractors for 35 years, and he was a relationship sales guy. But just because you take someone to a NASCAR race or out golfing a couple times doesn't mean they're going to buy from you, doesn't mean they're going to understand why they need to change. So I think the relationship has to be built not only on trust and rapport, but also your ability to sort of challenge the thinking of your customer. And I think when you can do that, I mean, if you take sort of the way that the challenger sale thinks about this and their mentality, it's sort of teach, tailor, take control, create a teachable moment for your prospects, tailor that to their organization. And if they then understand the problem, if they then commit to change, commit to a better outcome, you earn the ability to take control of that deal. So now you can be a little pushy, but you're doing that not for your deal, you're doing that for their outcome. You are an advocate for their future success, based on a foundation of need and a commitment to change that has already happened. That, quite frankly, is one of the hardest and most important parts of the sales process. So I think that is where the best sales reps today win, by creating that foundation of trust, building on top of that a foundation of a commitment to change, and then providing a level of compassionate urgency, right, to get that deal across the line to benefit both parties.
I love that. Let's talk a bit more on content and how B2B companies can utilize it. So something that I hear a lot is we're putting out content, but we don't know if it's translating into business results that are meaningful. So what are the KPIs, or what are the things that B2B companies should be tracking to make sure that they understand the impact that content is driving on their organization?
Yeah, I mean, content's a hard one, right? Because I think, the easiest way to do that would be to, to put forms at the end of content and try to track how it goes all the way through. I think it's really important in these complex purchase cycles that you consider the body of work that it takes, right? And that you don't think of each piece of content as a direct response tool or something that is going to directly lead to the sale. Like, if you're selling some 6 or 7 figure IT deal, let's not pretend the white paper generated the deal, right? Like, there isn't going to be one thing you can point back to and say, that's what did it. It's going to be a combination of things. So that's why, like, I think to really understand causality and to really understand attribution of the deal, you need some pretty complex tools that most companies aren't going to afford and aren't going to buy. So instead, the simplest thing you could do is just sort of make sure that you've got a track record. You're tracking what people have experienced in your CRM or your marketing automation platform. Like, I prefer to have a lot of that in CRM because that's where the deal's going to get closed. And then ultimately take your best deals, take your deals to the closed one, and do a regression analysis on what happened, and look for what content, look for what formats, look for what venues were the most likely to be included in that body of work. It's not perfect, but I mean, I remember doing this for my very first client when I started consulting 10, 12 years ago. My very first client, we just did a spreadsheet and we just sort of looked at where the commonalities were, what showed up the most often. And it wasn't perfect, but it gave us tons of clues on where to go put our efforts. Not only who the sales team was calling, what marketing campaigns we did, what messages we used. So I think too many companies are looking for that one thing. It's not going to exist. Look for the body of work. Look for things that have higher weighting attribution based on the data that you have, and make smart decisions based on that.
And I want to hear your thoughts, but in my opinion, there are other things that, and I think I remember you talking about this in a keynote, about how there are things that sometimes cannot be measured, but they're critically important, right? So I think they're I'm a basketball player, and there's things that you can do in a game that don't show up on the stat line. And I think it happens the same way in content marketing.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think about, so I'm a base guy, right? I think about, things that really, you don't even have to be a fast base runner, but there are things you can do on the base paths that distract the pitcher, that distract the fielders, that get the fielders out of position. So the ground ball that might have been double play is actually sneak through the outfield and now have a first and third situation, right? And there's no stat for that. So it's like, what are the intangibles, right? Like, so I think, to understand, again, like, just go back to your target audience and what they care about and what their buying journey looks like, and put things in place that help them make progress. And the other thing to keep in mind, I think, for most marketers that can be frustrating, is that your prospect isn't going to move as quickly as you want them to.
Right.
So sometimes 3 steps is faster than 1 to get someone to the next stage of the buying process. Like, no one is going to say yes to the question of, would you, thanks for downloading the white paper, would you like to see a demo, right? And so I think you have to understand how the prospect is going to think, help them in their head, help them cognitively move along and agree to move along at various stages of that buying process. You're going to be far more successful in the long run, especially for those deals that are going to take a long time anyway, right? And if you can have those incremental changes and incremental moves, and along the way building trust and credibility with that prospect, they're going to be willing to come to the next meeting. They're going to be willing to read the next email. They're going to be more willing to move with you in an increased velocity the more they learn and the more they commit to.
Awesome. I think we're very aligned in that sense. Before we wrap this up for the next 4 or 5 minutes, I wanted to do a quick fire of questions in a game that I call B2B in 5 years. So okay. I'm going to ask you a question or certain topics for B2B, and you tell me how do you think it's going to look like or change in 2025.
All right.
So the first part is automation. How do you think it's going to change in 5 to 10 years?
I think we're going to get smarter at machine learning. I think, right now, for example, a lot of companies still use lead scoring, but most lead scoring is still arbitrary. And the tools we use don't automatically change scoring based on the behavior they see that is driving action and not. So I think marketing automation is going to get smarter at automating decision-making that we aren't taking advantage of it in an intelligent way today. And I think we're going to see more marketing automation create more personalized experiences and more actions for humans. Like if I think about, like we talked about sales enablement earlier, like a big part of sales enablement is helping increase the efficiency of your sales team, which in many cases comes down to, who should I call next? Who should I talk to today that's ready for a conversation, and what do I say to them? So I think maybe that's not marketing automation, or it's just intelligence for me. Like, as I'm a sales guy, how do I make the best use of my day-to-day to make the biggest impact on my pipeline? Who do I call, with what message, and why, with what next step? Like, machines will get smarter in the next 3 to 5 years to answer that question for us.
I love that. What about events and conferences in 5 years? I know
they'll be back
right now with everything.
Yeah, no, they'll be back. There's no question. I mean, we saw them come back after 2008. We saw them come back after 9/11. I think, it will be a couple years, I think, before we see a real material return to the big conferences. I think that there's a difference between people getting on a plane to go to an event and getting in a car to go to an event. So more quickly, I think we will see a return to local events, to local field marketing events, like, breakfasts and dinners and lunch and learns and things like that. I think we'll see some of those things come back in a more local, regional level. But I think one thing we're learning, and one thing sales teams are learning right now, is that nothing replaces getting in front of your prospect. Nothing replaces seeing the whites of someone's eyes and being able to just spend time together. And sometimes it is worth it, right? It may not be worth it for all of your customers, but depending on your role, like, there's still value in that venue and the efficiency of getting people together in person. So 5 years from now, I think we'll see something very similar to what we saw a year ago.
What about ebooks and white papers as lead generation tactics?
They're not going anywhere. I think we have fewer people that are reading 20-page white papers, but we all still think we're going to read them. So if you see a topic you're interested in, you're more likely to engage with that. I do think some companies are getting smarter relative to that. And now, like for instance, I've got 3 young kids. They all read, but more often they read graphic novels. I don't care what they read as long as they're reading. So I think we'll see the graphic novelization of white papers more often moving forward, where it's not this big academic, like, text dense paper, but it's going to be shorter. I mean, if you think about like a white paper you put in front of, a CMO, I would take the white paper, take out all the words, and only leave the graphics and the captions, right? I mean, and honestly, like, same message gets across, you can have the same impact. So I think we're going to see a change in format based on shorter attention spans. But the general concept of a white paper or an educational tool is going to be around for sure.
What about ABM? Because ABM had a big rise in the last 5 years. So where do you think it's going in the next 5 to 10 years?
There's no question that ABM represents a dramatic improvement in the way marketing addresses complex buying journeys and buying committees, as well as the way marketing works with sales. I think of ABM as a hashtag, right? Or as a title, similar to what we saw with social selling 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, social selling was everywhere. You don't hear people talk about that now. And it didn't go away. It just became part of selling. It's just like good sellers are incorporating social tools and tactics to help them sell. I think ABM's on the same path. I think in 3 to 5 years, more people will be doing what we think of as ABM today. I don't know that we'll call it ABM. I think it's just going to be better marketing.
And the last one for this, and I know it's very general, but content in 5 years, how do you think it's going to change and improve?
We are consuming more content than ever before. I think maybe we're reading less, but we're listening to more podcasts. We're watching more videos. We're spending more time with content. So, the value and importance of content for buyers and sellers is only going to increase. I think that we need to, as sellers, as vendors, we need to pay very close attention to the trends of how buyers are consuming content, in what format, in what channels, and make sure that we're adjusting our content strategy to that. The message in the buying journey may remain constant, but the way that your prospects engage and self-educate around that will continue to evolve and diversify. But there's going to be more and more opportunity to engage as we consume more and more content.
I love that. And last question before we wrap this up, because we could be talking for an hour, but I want to be respectful of your time. You're a CEO that has built a great personal brand. My agency is focused on B2B CEOs' personal brand as well. So I wanted to ask you, what's one advice you would give other B2B CEOs when they're thinking about growing their personal brand or creating content? What would you recommend to them from what you've been doing for 10, 15 years?
Consistency. I didn't, when I started my business, I didn't intend to build a brand. I just wanted to build a business. I wanted to, I knew that for a lot of the people that I ultimately wanted to sell to, they may not have a need right away, but I needed some way to sort of stay in front of them and earn their attention. So what that has evolved into what is really a daily checklist of creating content, of curating content, of thinking of new content, I've had a blog for 12 years. Now I've had a podcast for 4 years. We're starting to do more video. But the key to all of that is consistency, making a daily and weekly habit of sharing and engaging with your audience, and then building your audience over time. We kind of started this talking about random acts of marketing, right? And I think I see a lot of CEOs and a lot of executives get a momentary level of excitement around building their brand, and they do a couple tweets and they record a video or two, and then they're gone and you don't see them again, right? So to do this well, look, there's no shortcut. You have to put in the work, and doing that on a consistent, regular, disciplined basis is really important.
I love that. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. This was a great episode. Well, where can our listeners reach out to you? I believe LinkedIn's a good place. We'll put the link there.
Yeah.
What else can they get in touch?
I appreciate that. I would love to connect with anyone. Our website, Heinz Marketing, that's HEINZ, like the ketchup, marketing.com. We've got 12 plus years of content, blog posts, best practice guides, research, all for free. So help yourself. I'm on Twitter at Heinz Marketing. Like we're practicing what we preach. We post, great articles we find out in the market about sales and marketing up there every day, and just would love to talk to anyone directly. I'm just Matt, M-A-T-T, at HeinzMarketing.com.
Yeah, and his keynotes on YouTube are great, by the way, if you're listening. And like I said, if you're listening, feel free to subscribe and share. Matt, thank you for being here. Let's stay in touch.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Bye-bye.